The purpose of this video is to prepare you for the 4 mark and 8 mark questions, where you're asked to comment on Tacitus' style. So in this video, I'm not going to give you a translation. You can look at my other videos for that. But instead, I'm going to go through the text, picking out words which could be useful in those longer questions. On this slide, I've also included a short introduction in English at the top left, and I've also included a map which shows you some of the key geographical locations which are mentioned in the text. For example, here is the island of Kos, where Piso is when he hears the news of Germanicus' death. Here, in the heel of Italy, is Brundisium, which is the port which Agrippina sails to when she's coming back to Rome after her husband's death. Here is Syria, the province of Rome which Piso governed and where Germanicus was in charge of the army. And here is Armenia, which is where Germanicus went to attend to matters after he had been insulted by Plancina. Now let's look at the text itself. At the beginning, I'm struck by the harsh sounds in the first line, the QU in quo, the hard Cs in Calarius, Concilia, and in the middle of the word inciperet. All these harsh sounds together are alliterative, and they reflect perhaps the urgency with which Piso was wanting to get on with his plans, because these words mean so that he could get on with his plans more quickly, and the harsh C sounds perhaps reflect that. In the second line, we've got 2 words with very similar meanings. These are largitione, which mean generosity or largesse, and ambitu, which mean bribery. To use 2 words for essentially the same action, Tacitus is putting a particular emphasis on Piso's bribery of the troops, drawing our attention to it. We can also be interested in the word infimos, a strong word there, which means the lowest of the soldiers. In the next line, there's an example of a syndeton, which is significant. A syndeton is the absence of conjunctions or linking words. And here's our example. We've got 2 pairs of words. First of all, veteres centuriones, the old centurions. And that's followed by severos tribunos, the severe or strict tribunes or military officers. But between them, there is absolutely no linking word or conjunction. So Tacitus' style is more concise and more compact as he moves from one set of officers to the next. He's therefore making his point more punctually, more persuasively. Then we notice an example of tricolon. Tricolon is a group of 3, and this was a feature which is very typically found in rhetorical writing, where a group of 3 ideas can be more persuasive and more convincing than 1 or 2 ideas. Here's our group of 3. These are things which Piso allowed in the army. First of all, laziness or idleness in the camp. That's the first. Secondly, rowdiness or bad behaviour in the cities. That's our second. And thirdly, a much longer example, he allowed soldiers to run riot throughout the fields. So you notice in our tricolon we have one short phrase of 3 words, another short phrase of 3 words. It's a very similar sort of phrase. And then the third phrase is a long one. It's as though his ideas are building momentum and getting longer as he goes. That's what makes this tricolon particularly powerful. And such a tricolon, where the third example is longer than the other 2, is sometimes called a tricolon crescendo or a rising tricolon. Then Tacitus turns his attention to Piso's wife Plancina. It's interesting here that she hurls insults first towards Agrippina and then towards Germanicus. And once more, there's an example of a syndeton because there is no conjunction between those two. Perhaps it's more shocking that she should be hurling insults at Germanicus than at Agrippina, because as a woman she was significantly below Germanicus in status in every way, and possibly for that reason Tacitus saves the more shocking one of the two till second. In the last sentence, there's no verb. Tacitus just writes, nota haec Germanico, these things known to Germanicus. We might expect the verb errant there, but there isn't one. This makes Tacitus' style very concise, and it shows the reader how Germanicus ignored the insults and concentrated on attending to affairs in Armenia. Now there's a short cut in the text, and that's explained in the text at the top left of the slide in English. Tacitus picks up the story when Germanicus is ill, and he's convinced that he's been poisoned by Piso. The first word in this part of the text is saiwam, which is a very strong word, which means savage. So Tacitus has chosen to start this passage with the very strong words, the savage force of the illness. And that puts an emphasis on just how ill Germanicus is. Now in the rest of this sentence there are many details which suggest magic, superstition, and the dark arts. This is where Tacitus explains what was found in the floor and walls of Germanicus' house. There's a list of things which were found, some of them really quite horrible, and some described in quite a bit of detail. We first of all have the dug-up remains of human bodies. Then we have the spells and the curses. And then, described in some detail here, the name of Germanicus inscribed on lead tablets. This idea of cursing somebody by writing their name on a lead tablet was a practice which we know went on in Roman times. We had the charred ashes, which was smeared with rotten flesh. And then other evil objects. Rather vague, that one, malefica, but it's a strong word, malefica, evil objects, with which it's believed that souls are consecrated to the gods of the underworld. All in all, that half sentence, from et reperiebantur to sacrari, is full of references to evil, magic, and witchcraft. Moving on, there are some interesting words in the second part of this passage. Interesting, I think, for their sounds. We have the men who were sent by Piso, who were accused, or suspicion fell upon them, because they were looking out for signs that Germanicus was ill. Now, I notice that the IS sound in missi is repeated again in Piso, making missia pisone almost rhyme. And there's another example of almost rhyme in the next line, when we see that in the word valetudinis, we have an A followed by an E. In adversi, again, an A followed by an E. Signa expectarent, we have again an A followed by an E, and again there, A followed by an E. Now these examples of almost rhyming vowels is assonance, and it's sometimes interesting to comment on assonance because it's something like that which makes the words a little bit more noticeable. And at this point where Tacitus is beginning to point the finger at Piso, it's significant that the words are memorable. In the next line, we have two words which express emotion. The emotions are anger and fear, both of which Germanicus feels. And finally, in this section, quite a short sentence, beginning with componit and ending with renuntiabat. He composes a letter in which he renounces their friendship. It's interesting, perhaps, that this is such a short sentence for a short and final and very decisive action. I am not friends with you anymore. We might also notice that componit is a verb in the present tense. There are many such examples in Tacitus where the present tense is used even though the story being told is in the past. And the fact that he's used a present verb makes the passage more vivid, draws the reader in. This scene describes Germanicus' last moments. First of all, we begin with a pair of C's. Interesting alliteration here. As he believed that he was getting better, created it con valescere. And the harsh sounds perhaps reflect the renewed vigour and energy that Germanicus feels. But that in turn is answered by the words fessum fiebat, where the alliteration of the two F's suggests something very different, a body which has become weak and tired. In the next line, we have rather a stark, concise way of describing the death approaching, ubi fines aderat, literally, when the end was present. There's no emotion there, there's no detail, but it's very clear and very concise. He then addressed his friends. Now the word adloquitur is another one of those examples of Tacitus using the present tense, even though the story is a story told in the past. That use of the present draws the reader in and helps us perhaps to imagine that we too are there. And a further example of him making it vivid and drawing the reader in is his use of direct speech. This is something Tacitus does quite a bit in his histories, and even though the words may not have been the exact words of the speaker, it does help to dramatise the events. In Germanicus' speech, each of the sentences begins with a verb. It's a rather an unusual position in the sentence in Latin, to have the verb at the beginning, so it's usually worthy of comment when it's there. Now, our first word, erit, is a verb in the future tense. Now, the use of the future suggests something very definite and very conclusive. You will have an opportunity to complain, he says. Now, the next verb, decet, is a verb in the present tense. It's an interesting verb because it means it is right. He tells them what it's right for them to do, which is not to lament me with useless lament, with useless wailing, but carry out my wishes, carry out what I wanted. Now, while we're on that sentence still, I want to pick out the word ignavo, which means useless. It can mean vain, cowardly, idle. It's quite a strong word, and with that word, he makes it very clear he doesn't want anybody just wailing for him uselessly. Instead, he wants them to be men of action and to carry out his own desires. And he repeats the word quae. That repetition is quite important because he's twice saying that he has his own wishes. First of all, quae voluerit meminisse, those things which he wanted remembered, and those things which he wanted done. So the repetition of quae twice reminds his friends that there are things which he wanted. And then we get on to vindicabitis vos. Vindicabitis is another future verb. You will avenge. Interestingly, the next word is vos. You will revenge. He doesn't really need that pronoun, but by putting it in, it allows him to have some alliteration, v plus v. And the V sound in Latin, even though we reckon it was pronounced like a W rather than a V, is still quite a strong and powerful way to start that sentence. You will get your revenge. He then goes on to say, you'll get your revenge if you loved me rather than my status. That word diligebatis looks as though it's his last word, and that word means loved. Perhaps to end his speech on that word, which means you loved, is a powerful, emotive way of putting some pressure on his friends. Now, his friends replied by swearing that they would rather lose their life than lose their opportunity for revenge. You rawerent means they swore, and that is perhaps a key word in that last sentence. I might also point out that they embraced the right hand of the dying man. Now just look at your word order here. Aplectentes means they embraced, clasped, and dextram means the right hand. And in between those words is this word morientis, which means the dying man. So we have a sort of framing of words with the right hand being clasped, coming around the word which means dying. And perhaps those three words, 1, 2, 3 here, are rather cleverly positioned, because the words which mean right hand and clasp actually frame the word which means dying man, just as the clasping right hand actually frames or embraces the dying man. In this scene, Tacitus describes the immediate reaction to Germanicus' death. And there are many words here which are quite emphatic. First of all, we have ingenti luctu, with great grief. Then we have the word indoluerant, which means they mourned, and that's an example of a verb being placed at the start of the sentence. It makes it more prominent, puts more of an emphasis on their mourning. Then we have tanta, which means so great. Tanta goes with both comitas, his friendliness or his charm towards his allies. It also goes with mansuetudo, his kindliness or his mercy towards his enemies. You may have noticed how often Tacitus uses pairs of words in this sentence. So first of all, we get the pair of the pairs of people mourning for him. We get the mourning of the province, that's the first of the pair, and the surrounding peoples, that's the second. Then we have the foreign nations, that's the first, and the kings, that's the second. Then we have his friendliness towards the allies, that's the first of the pair, and the mercy or kindness towards his enemies, that's the second. Then we're told that he won everybody's respect because of his appearance, and also because, or his expression, waters can mean either, and also his eloquence, or his manner of speaking. So it seems that time and again Tacitus is giving us not just one reason, but two reasons why Germanicus was popular, and this clearly emphasises his popularity all the more. Then finally in this section we come to the comparison of Germanicus with Alexander the Great, and there are a number of reasons given why he should be so compared, and these reasons are all given without connectives, more examples of asyndeton. So we're told it's because of his looks, his age, the manner of his death and the place of his death, these four things that made him similar. And then with a little bit more detail on each one, both Germanicus and Alexander, were good-looking, born of a famous family, and died at about 30 years old. You may have noticed at the end of this passage, where he's talking about the looks, the family, and the age, we're finishing here with a group of three, another example of a tricolon, which gives this passage a neat and a powerful conclusive end.